Sex workers of Reddit. What was the saddest request you have ever received? This was a long time ago. But for an hour of his 90-minute session he just sat there and talked about his ex-wife who hated him. He also asked me if he should stop cynically supporting his stepson because he wouldn't stop smoking weed in his house. Then read me some poetry he wrote about his ex-wife. I never saw him again, but he emailed me more of his poetry afterwards. I once had someone who gave me $250 a week to just talk and smoke weed with him. No hanky-panky at all. He was very lonely because his wife passed and just wanted female company. One day he broke down during one of our hangouts saying how much he wished his wife was here. I just let him cry while I held him. Probably not the saddest, but it's the most recent one. Guy gave me $300 every 2 weeks just to text him and treat him nicely. No physical contact. No nudes or sexting. Literally just wanted good morning and good night texts. And someone to encourage him as far as work and his hobbies went. In my younger days, I worked at a mail review. I had this woman of about 40 something who would come in fairly regularly. She asked me to a dinner date. I obliged her request. About 5 minutes in, she started bawling. And when I asked what's the matter, she told me I was an exact replica of her son whom she lost to cancer. She proceeded to show me pictures. And TBH, the resemblance was uncanny. We chatted over the years since. But in 2018 she passed of cancer. The first client I ever saw asked me to spit in his mouth and tell him I loved him. Afterwards he told me his dad had cancer. And he took out a photo album and we looked at pictures of his dad's youth. Not one in particular, but I have had a few clients who were severely disabled. Like in the way that they were paralyzed and required mechanical ventilation. It makes me super frustrated and sad for these gents because they still need a physical touch that isn't a medical necessity. They still have desires and wants. But they are literally trapped because they can't go anywhere on their own and because of the stigma of sex walk. They don't think their family would allow a FSSW to visit. This is a different kind of interaction of similar tone. And I had a phone hanky-panky client. It became clear after a few calls that I think his only interactions were online and involved giving money for attention back. I don't know if he had the means to keep this up or not. But he got very weird around the 5th call. Upset I wasn't online as much to talk. Wanted to talk all throughout the day, and when he couldn't afford it would try to haggle me lower in price. I told him that this amount isn't healthy for the mind and he should seek therapy. I was diagnosed with PTSD and had wonderful therapy that changed my life around. He got upset at me and blocked me. 2 days later, I wake up to text messages asking me to take him back. He sent photos of the front and back of all of his credit cards to prove he was serious. I felt so bad for him. Not me, but a story told to me from a girl I know who used to be a hanky-panky worker. She had a regular client who'd come in every week and just wanted to talk, be held, or innocent things like that. Never wanted anything sexual. According to her, this wasn't that unusual, as some guys felt guilty about going to a brothel or just wanted fetishes satisfied. But she said this dude was different. From what she pieced together, he had an extremely unhappy home life. It seemed the only happiness he had in life was the hour he spent with this girl. She said one time he booked an appointment but never showed up. And they never heard from him again. I'm a guy who shoots porn. So technically a hanky-panky worker. I've got some requests of PH users who sent me some messages. One guy just wanted me to shoot a girl who would say hi. John, I changed the name. I love you, John. I miss you, John, and so on. I guess this guy has nobody who talks to him. I've got a lot of stories. But honestly, the amount of guys I've spoken to in private who just needed someone to talk to be kind to them, to feel a connection with. It's a lot. I try to portray a very cheerful and kind persona as a cam girl. So I think I attract guys that are more lonely than horny. I could go on for days. Can't tell you how many men I've seen on the brink of devastation who just needed a listening ear and a warm touch. People are fragile creatures. Edit, my first award. Just hold me. Please. Silent tears ensued. Not my story, but someone else's that somehow stuck with me. Owner of an escort service who shared a story of a guy who apparently was from a wealthy family, but as a child hardly ever saw his parents. He was raised by an au pair or nanny with beautiful long hair which he always combed for her as a kid. Into puberty he had got aroused from combing it. She noticed and gave him his first sexual experience. Since then the man always requested girls with long hair and only wanted to comb it and then get a hand job. Kinda sad thinking about all the parental love he missed and trying to compensate like this. IDK if this counts, but I saw foot pics and I used to have this one customer who was the nicest guy ever. He was pretty young, only like a couple of years older than me, I'm 20. And overall just super guilty about his kink. He would always pay me really well and was overly polite. He would pay me extra and for my pedicures. And never was demanding about anything. Which is super rare. We would have long conversations where I would try to convince him that liking feet was a mild kink and nothing to worry about. He never really got over the guilt though. He came from an extremely Catholic family, so he was super repressed. Overall nicest customer guy I've ever met. Would shower me in compliments and our relationship honestly just felt like a friendship. I'm starting to get an impression that hanky-panky work is closer to therapy than just sex. I have known a lot of hanky-panky workers and variations on this often came up when chatting. Mentioned a few times already about people just wanting to be held happens a lot. It's not viewed as sad at all. There are dozens of stories I heard that were sad in different ways, but the two that stand out are about a fairly young Australian guy who got his new friend for the evening back to his room, and when she was checking him in the shower she seen his junk was a disaster zone. She said it was all a swollen lump. He did not want sex. He wanted her to push pencils down his penis. She refused to even touch him and he started crying. The other story I remember is about a middle-aged European guy who, when he got someone back to his room, would make phone calls during sex. He would call his wife and kids and talk while in the act. He would call at weird times and say he could not sleep and he wanted to hear their voices. He could not do anything until he made a call and started acting the good husband and father. BTW, I was told this story by more than one person. He did it a lot. I received a message from a submissive man asking me to make him my slave. It's not an outlandish request when you're a hanky-panky worker involved with kink. But I don't consider myself dominant at all, so I politely declined the request. He replied and tried to bribe me with a tribute. Expensive gifts. And it eventually escalated with him saying he'd take his life for me. This man was not a regular or customer I had interacted with before. It caught me off guard. I'd like to think it was just some desperate cry for attention and fulfilling a mistress-slave fantasy. But it really made me uncomfortable. Also, a lot of submissive men who message random women to be their mistress usually have no concern for safety or sanity during scenes. So even if I was interested in taking on that role, it would not have been worth the money or stress. Had this old man just come in and who literally brought food for us to eat and just chat because he was lonely. Nothing super sad. But one of my old regulars was a volunteer firefighter who lived alone in a big house. Called me when he'd get off a bad shift, and during our sessions he rarely spoke. He would just lay beside me for up to a half hour at a time. Quiet and still. One time he called me Mary, not my real name, and never acknowledged it. So I didn't either. I like to think seeing me was comforting in some way for him. That's the thing about hanky-panky work. Society may see it as just girls selling their bodies for cash. But there's so much emotional work that goes into providing a safe, enjoyable, intimate experience for a complete stranger. A rabbi spent most of his time questioning his faith. asking me for my opinion on the proof of God. I don't believe in God. I told him that he needs to be brave and not practice something he does not believe in. He would agree. Put on his religious cloths and schedule another appointment where the exact same scenario played out. It felt like the Twilight Zone with him. I had hanky-panky with a 23-year-old guy who was younger than me by 3 years. And his wish was to have hanky-panky as his last dying wish. He wanted me to make him feel loved. As if he found the right person for him. He never found anyone in his life that could make him feel better. So I had to stand up for him. Damn. He was a good guy and yet he had cancer. He wanted to make me the beneficiary of his life insurance, then have me go to Colombia separately from him. Meet up with him and kill him erotically. I'm still not sure if he was being serious or wanted to kill me. He did say he had a degenerative disease that leave him completely paralyzed in a few years. And he did have me use some wire mesh condom on a big dildo up his ass until I got uncomfortable with how bloody he was getting. He wanted me to continue sanding his hole. At least he tipped really well afterwards. My wife is a dancer and the saddest story she told me was about a Syrian, I think, refugee. He'd been in America for 2 years waiting on paperwork for his family to follow him and immigrate. He felt really guilty for being there but was really lonely and just wanted a hug to be held for human contact. Told her about his family the whole time. This is such a sadly beautiful thread. Thanks for the question. And to all those who shared their stories. Really brought a tear to my eye. IDK about SAP, but I'm a go-go dancer and I have, well before corona, a guy who pays me to choke and slap him. Like as hard as I can. I left a mark. Another guy likes dancers to piss in an empty beer bottle and bring it to him. He will literally start chugging it before you even walk away. It's so disgusting. I refuse to touch him or do a dance with him. But I'll pee in a bottle for $40. One of the saddest I guess is a guy who used to give me $400 $500 every night he would come. And not sad because of anything he asked me to do. But because he was a 50-year-old with a wife and no kids who was secretly gay. He would come to the bar and pay me $500 just to sit with him and talk. He was pretty quiet and he barely even touched me. I don't know why. But I was honestly expecting to read some story about a guy who just lost his wife and didn't want to be alone for a night. Instead, the first thing I see is guy cried because hanky-panky worker didn't want to shove pencils into his pee-pee hole. Man. People are freaky deaky. Like a few replies in this thread. I've done my fair share of counseling with guys who are in relationships, marriages that they absolute hate but can't leave for some reason. I do my best to listen but try to avoid giving out advice. Always needed to be careful giving advice to guys who I just heard hanky-panky with. Heard stories of escorts who had done that and the guy has taken as an invitation to leave their wife for the escort. Saddest for me was the guy who was incredibly excited at the thought of bringing me some of his wife's clothes to wear for our next session. She was very much alive. I don't know what the thrill was, but it wasn't for me. Avoided his calls after that. Not me, but a friend of mine. This happened recently too. We were out drinking and decided to call 2 local escorts. And also got a hotel for ourselves with 2 queen beds. They came knocking on the door shortly after. It was 2 really young and nice looking girls in their 20s. Both blonde. Somehow his escort, or should I say partner, looked a lot like his ex-wife. His ex-wife cheated on him while we were deployed overseas. We are both in the army. He loved her really much. And also because of the alcohol, I guess. He hugged that girl for a long while and cried. I felt bad for him. He was saying, I loved you so much. Why did you do that to me, etc. He held her in his arms and kept crying and kissing her forehead. He fell asleep after a while. I told her that I am sorry that my buddy got emotional. And explained to her the situation. She said it's okay and she would sleep next to him the whole night and that we only need to pay for 2-hour fee instead of overnight. The next day morning my buddy tipped her pretty good and told her to take care of herself. Not gonna lie, I was a stereotypical type when it comes to hanky-panky workers, but she really changed my view about it. At one point, I worked as a dominatrix in a Nick dungeon. There was some older guy that came in and asked to meet me for a pre-session interview to see if we matched. He asked me if I had any dental experience and wanted me to remove some of his teeth. He said that his insurance wouldn't cover some dental work he needed, and that if he had teeth that were worse, then it would be covered. I politely declined and did not do a session with him. Apparently, this guy was pretty famous throughout the Nick scene and had asked the same request of many pros. I always wondered if he actually needed the dental work done, or if it was just some fetish. I'd be much happier to believe he got off on this and didn't actually think going to sex workers was a good method for dentistry.
Hi there. Look, if you enjoyed the video, well, why not go ahead and hit that like and subscribe to Reddit Stories. In fact, if you want to see even more responses to this thread, well then, take a look. There's the link in the description below. And remember, show some love to those authors while you're there. And I look forward to seeing you next time.